August 19, 1942. Deep in the thick, suffocating jungles near Taivu Point, Guadalcanal, 2nd Lieutenant Genjiro IMI of the 8th Independent Anti-Tank Gun Company scribbled in his diary, capturing a feeling no seasoned soldier had ever expected: fear. IMI and 916 of his fellow soldiers, under Colonel Kono Ichiki, had just arrived after a silent night landing from destroyers. Their mission: recapture Henderson Field. They had been told it would be easy, 2,000 Americans at most, weak, untested, and soft from life and luxury. Colonel Ichiki was confident, almost reckless. "These are Americans," he said. "We will sweep them into the sea before sunrise." But what awaited them was a nightmare they had never imagined. This wasn't just defeat, it was the annihilation of every assumption the Japanese army held about warfare. The jungle itself became the enemy. Darkness, once an ally, turned traitor. And the Americans? They fought with a deadly system that made courage and valor alone meaningless. 2 weeks earlier, on August 7th, 11,000 Marines had stormed Lunga Point, beginning Operation Watchtower. Their goal seemed simple: seize the nearly finished airfield and hold it. But the island was a tropical hell. Mountains rose 8,000 feet, swamps and jungles choked the coastal plain, and the heat and humidity were relentless. Mosquitoes and disease were constant killers, often worse than enemy fire. Yet, by the morning of their landing, the airfield was almost undefended. The Japanese had fled, leaving behind supplies, and the key to controlling the surrounding seas, Henderson Field. By August 19th, Ichiki's men were pushing through the suffocating jungle, expecting an easy fight. But the Americans were already waiting, hidden in meticulously prepared positions. A small Marine patrol led by Captain Charles Brush stumbled upon Ichiki's reconnaissance units along the coastal track to Kohi Point. What followed was chaos in miniature: gunfire, grenades, screams echoing through the dense canopy. In minutes, 31 Japanese soldiers were dead, and more critically, captured documents revealed a shocking truth: the Americans were far stronger than Japanese intelligence had predicted. Panic should have gripped Ichiki's command, but overconfidence fueled recklessness. Reports of American strength reached General Vandergrift, who immediately understood the looming threat. He reinforced defenses along the Tenaru River sandbar with interlocking machine gun positions designed to turn the open space into a death trap. Unaware of the trap, Ichiki made a fateful decision. He would attack immediately, relying on the legendary spirit of Japanese soldiers, believing bravery alone could overcome American firepower. That night, hundreds of his men would charge into history, and into the killing zone that awaited them. Just after midnight, August 20th, Japanese soldiers emerged from the jungle. Screaming battle cries shattered the quiet of the night as men charged across the sandbar. But they ran straight into prepared Marine positions. M1917A1 Browning machine guns erupted, their water-cooled barrels spitting death. The interlocking fields of fire left no blind spots. Rifles cracked, grenades exploded, and 37mm anti-tank guns fired canister rounds like giant shotguns. Waves of men fell in seconds. Those who reached Marine lines were met with hand-to-hand combat, knives clashing, fists pounding, rifles swinging. Hours passed in a relentless nightmare of fire and blood. By dawn, over 800 of Ichiki's men were dead or dying. Colonel Ichiki himself vanished in the chaos. Some accounts say he fell leading a charge, others claim he committed ritual suicide. Marine casualties were far lighter, about 40 in total. The battle's outcome shattered Japanese assumptions. Americans didn't panic under night attacks. They didn't flee. They waited, aimed, and methodically destroyed the attackers. If you approve of this pacing and style, I will continue to Section 4 and onward, gradually covering the next battles, the jungle horrors, the logistics nightmare, and the eventual Japanese collapse, section by section, keeping every piece dramatic and viral ready. The aftermath of Tenaru was more than a tactical disaster. It was a psychological earthquake for Japanese troops. Their revered combat spirit, honed in China and Southeast Asia, had been powerless against American firepower. Diaries and post-war accounts would reveal the shock. Courage alone could not overcome a system built to kill. Meanwhile, the jungle itself worked against them. Thick vines, palm trees, and uneven terrain slowed every movement. Disease and parasites stalked the soldiers as silently as the Marines' rifles. Malaria, dysentery, and tropical ulcers disabled more men than bullets ever could. Food was scarce, Supplies trapped by the Americans' control of Henderson Field meant starvation crept into every unit. The once proud warriors of the Imperial Army began to wither physically and mentally, learning in brutal lessons that logistics mattered as much as skill. Across the island, the Americans were consolidating. Henderson Field became the hub of the Cactus Air Force, projecting power across the Solomons. Planes patrolled the skies, ships patrolled the waters, and ground forces fortified positions with lethal precision. Every advantage the Japanese had counted on, the night, their spirit, their training, was neutralized by preparation, coordination, and sheer material superiority. By September, Japanese commanders planned another massive assault. This time, Kawaguchi's forces would attack from the south, aiming for a ridge overlooking Henderson Field. Unknown to them, Marine intelligence had anticipated the move. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson positioned 840 Marines along the narrow coral spine, known later as Edson's Ridge. Every tree, hill, and ravine was prepared. Machine guns overlapped fields of fire. Mortars and artillery were registered on every likely approach. Night fell, September 12th. The Japanese advanced stealthily, infiltrating ravines, probing for weaknesses. Then the first wave hit. The Marines unleashed a torrent of bullets, shells, and grenades. Yet Japanese soldiers pressed on, crawling through mud, under fire, and into hand-to-hand combat. The screams of men clashing echoed across the ridge. Sergeant John Basilone and his machine gun crews became legends, holding positions alone when comrades fell. The night stretched into a living nightmare, testing endurance, courage, and human limits. By dawn, 830 to 850 Japanese soldiers were dead. The ridge had earned its blood-soaked name, Bloody Ridge. The Americans had once again demonstrated a terrifying combination of discipline, preparation, and firepower. After the crushing defeats at Tenaru and Bloody Ridge, Japanese forces faced a nightmare far worse than bullets: logistics. The Tokyo Express, a daring series of nightly destroyer runs, became their lifeline. Fast ships would dash from the Shortland Islands to Guadalcanal under cover of darkness, delivering soldiers and minimal supplies. Heavy equipment, artillery, tanks, trucks, could not be transported. Japanese troops arrived with only what they could carry, forced to rely on rice, coconuts, and whatever they could scavenge from the jungle. Starvation became as deadly as enemy fire. Meanwhile, disease ran rampant. Malaria, dysentery, fungal infections, and tropical ulcers swept through the ranks. Soldiers weakened by hunger and illness were easy prey for American bullets and shells. Field hospitals were overcrowded. Doctors could do little beyond applying bandages or watching men die. Letters home were scarce. Morale sank as the reality of isolation and attrition set in. The Americans, in stark contrast, were resupplied by Henderson Field, protected by aircraft during daylight. Canned rations, ammunition, medical supplies, all flowed reliably. Every day, the Marines grew stronger, better equipped, and more confident. Artillery and machine gun crews trained in the relentless heat, perfecting their deadly craft. Henderson Field was no longer just an airstrip. It was a fortress, a lifeline, and a weapon projected across the Solomons. By late September, Japanese commanders like Major General Kawaguchi prepared for the next assault. They had learned little from Tenaru. Courage and aggression remained central to their plans. But the jungle, the Americans, and the cruel calculus of starvation awaited them. Guadalcanal was becoming a crucible of suffering and revelation, an unforgiving classroom where Japanese troops were learning the hardest lesson of all: bravery alone would not win wars.
October 23 RD, 1942.
Japanese forces, exhausted, starving, and diseased, prepared their largest assault yet. Kawaguchi's 5,600 men moved through the suffocating jungle toward Henderson Field, aiming to crush the Americans before reinforcements arrived. Tanks, rare on Guadalcanal, rumbled across rivers and mud, but the Marines were ready. Anti-tank guns, artillery, and even M3 Stuart light tanks awaited, poised to turn the jungle into a killing ground. Night fell on October 24th.
Darkness, on sa japonaise allie, now favored the defenders.
Waves of soldiers surged through the jungle, attempting infiltration along narrow ridges and ravines. They crawled, sprinted, and fought with desperate ferocity, only to be met by concentrated fire. Machine guns spat relentless death, mortars exploded among the ranks, and artillery rained high-explosive shells with surgical precision. The screams of men, friend and foe, echoed across the shadowed jungle, punctuated by the roar of tanks and rifles. Sergeant John Basilone became a legend that night. When his machine gun crew fell, he carried ammunition under enemy fire, repaired broken guns, and led counterattacks to restore the line. Marines fought with rifles, pistols, knives, and anything they could grasp. Every breakthrough attempt was crushed. Every Japanese charge ended in staggering casualties. By dawn, more than 2,000 Japanese soldiers lay dead. American losses were severe but manageable, several hundred killed or wounded. The October onslaught proved a stark truth: Japanese courage and martial spirit, honed over years of victories, could not overcome coordinated firepower, logistics, and preparation. Guadalcanal was no longer just a battlefield. It had become a crucible, revealing the future of modern warfare, where systems and strategy trumped bravery alone. By November 1942, the struggle for Guadalcanal had shifted from jungle paths to open seas. Japanese supply convoys attempted to reinforce their starving troops, but American aircraft and ships made each run a nightmare. Henderson Field's planes struck relentlessly, sinking transports before they could unload vital food, ammunition, or artillery. Naval battles raged in the darkness, chaotic, lethal, and decisive. The Japanese lost battleships, cruisers, and thousands of sailors, while American forces, though battered, held control of the skies and sea. On shore, Japanese soldiers were collapsing under the strain. Malnutrition left men hollow-eyed, disease sapped strength, making every step through mud and vines a battle in itself. Starvation became routine. Rations dwindled to a single rice ball per day. Wounded soldiers, without medical care, often succumbed to infection. The jungle that had once been a hunting ground now became a tomb. In contrast, Marines were resupplied daily: canned food, medical supplies, fresh ammunition. Every sunrise reinforced the growing disparity in endurance and capability. The Japanese command clung to hope, sending what reinforcements they could via destroyers in the Tokyo Express. But each delivery was too small, too late, and too risky. The first signs of collapse were undeniable. Morale plummeted, units fractured, and once proud soldiers became shadows, scavenging for grass, roots, and anything to stave off death. Guadalcanal had become an industrial and logistical battle as much as a fight of courage. The Americans had mastered it. The Japanese could not. By late December, the Japanese forces on Guadalcanal were a shadow of their former strength. Starvation, disease, and constant American firepower had taken their toll. Yet they launched one final desperate offensive, hoping to recapture Henderson Field before reinforcements could solidify the American hold. Kawaguchi's troops moved through dense jungle, their rifles and bayonets ready, but morale was fragile, bodies weak. Every step was agony. American defenders, seasoned by months of combat, knew what was coming. Machine guns were positioned along likely attack routes, mortars zeroed in on choke points, and artillery crews awaited the signal to unleash destruction. Marines had endured the same sweltering heat, thick mud, and relentless mosquitoes, yet their supply lines never faltered. The contrast could not have been starker: one army sustained, the other starving and hollow. Night fell. The Japanese advanced, shadows creeping through the jungle. They struck with courage born of tradition, screaming battle cries into the darkness. But the Americans had turned the jungle into a trap. Pre-sighted fields of fire cut them down wave after wave. When some reached the American positions, hand-to-hand combat erupted, knives, rifles, and fists colliding in a desperate struggle. By dawn, hundreds more lay dead. This final offensive shattered any hope of retaking the island. The jungle, once an ally, had become their grave. Amid the chaos, individual acts of heroism lit the darkness. Marines like Sergeant John Basilone, already legendary from Edson's Ridge, carried ammunition under fire, repaired broken guns, and rallied men in the thick of battle. Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller led counterattacks personally, his voice cutting through the night, driving weary soldiers to hold positions at all costs. Even in death, courage left its mark. Every soldier fighting in the jungle knew that survival often meant sheer grit. Machine gun crews, artillery spotters, and riflemen became deadly components of an intricate system of defense. They weren't just fighting. Each man was a link in a chain of firepower and strategy that the Japanese could not break. The night revealed a chilling truth: bravery without support could be fatal. The Americans, for all their courage, had built a machine in the jungle, a lethal blend of men, guns, and coordination that no Japanese charge could overcome. While bullets and shells tore through ranks, disease silently decimated the Japanese. Malaria, dysentery, fungal infections, and tropical ulcers spread like wildfire. Starving men scavenged roots and leaves, rationing a single rice ball per day. Wounded soldiers died unattended, corpses burned when they had the strength. By October, more than half of the Japanese 17th Army was incapacitated. Combat effectiveness dropped to 30% of authorized strength. Every engagement became a struggle against not only the Marines but against their own failing bodies. Meanwhile, American troops, supplied daily from Henderson Field, recovered quickly from minor injuries and illnesses. Field hospitals with plasma, antibiotics, and surgical care ensured that each soldier could return to the line. Guadalcanal wasn't just a fight against an enemy army, it was a contest of logistics, preparation, and endurance, and the Americans had mastered it. Japanese diaries from Guadalcanal reveal the mental toll. Soldiers who had once believed in the invincibility of their warrior spirit were shattered. Courage, night fighting, and bayonet charges, once central to their doctrine, proved meaningless against systematic firepower. Shock, fear, and despair replaced confidence. Many realized they were no longer fighting to win, but simply to survive. Guadalcanal became a theater of psychological destruction, where survival depended on discipline, not bravery alone. The Americans, by contrast, understood the power of morale, supply, and preparation. Each victory, each repelled assault reinforced their confidence. Guadalcanal taught both sides that war was no longer about individual heroics. It was about systems, coordination, and endurance. Control of the skies and seas around Guadalcanal was decisive. Henderson Field's aircraft patrolled relentlessly, strafing Japanese positions, sinking supply ships, and defending Marines from naval bombardment. Offshore, battleships and cruisers provided fire support, delivering rounds with pinpoint accuracy. Radio communications linked observers and artillery, creating a synchronized web of destruction. Japanese commanders could no longer rely on stealth, speed, or surprise. Each movement risked annihilation. The jungle, night, and courage that had once served them were powerless against the combined might of American air, sea, and land coordination. Guadalcanal was now fully a game of industrial power executed with military precision. October 24th to 25th, Kawaguchi's last coordinated attack hit the southern approaches to Henderson Field. Troops moved in darkness, hoping to exploit gaps in American lines. Instead, they met pre-sighted machine gun positions, mortars, and artillery fire. Waves of soldiers fell by the hundreds, their courage unable to overcome overwhelming firepower. American defenses, now seasoned and reinforced, held every position. Marines counterattacked immediately, using rifles, machine guns, and tanks to eliminate infiltrating units. By dawn, the Japanese offensive had failed. Over 2,000 soldiers were dead. Starvation, disease, and firepower had combined to create a disaster that would signal the beginning of the end on Guadalcanal. By December, Japanese command recognized the hopelessness of the situation. Supplies were nearly gone, reinforcements impossible. The decision to evacuate Guadalcanal, named Operation Coup, salvaged approximately 10,652 men using destroyers over 3 nights in early February 1943. It was a remarkable feat under impossible conditions, but it could not erase the scale of defeat. The Japanese had lost over 25,000 soldiers on the island. Combat, disease, and starvation combined. The Americans, though weary, remained firmly in control. Guadalcanal was a hellish classroom. Over 6 months, more than 7,000 Americans and over 30,000 Japanese perished. Disease, starvation, and environmental hazards were as deadly as bullets. Survivors carried physical and psychological scars for life. The island's jungles, hills, and beaches bore silent testimony: wrecked aircraft, destroyed vehicles, and the bones of men left behind. Guadalcanal was more than a battle, it was a crucible shaping modern warfare. Japanese survivors faced a painful truth: their doctrine of night attacks, spiritual courage, and individual skill was obsolete against modern industrialized armies. American logistics, coordination, and firepower had shattered centuries of confidence. Post-war accounts reveal a consensus: Japan had underestimated American material and tactical strength. Guadalcanal marked the first time Japanese officers realized that their empire could not win through bravery alone. For the Americans, Guadalcanal reinforced the effectiveness of preparation, coordination, and resilience. Jungle warfare, amphibious operations, and combined arms tactics were honed to perfection. Individual heroism mattered, but the true advantage came from systems: supply lines, air support, artillery coordination, and morale. The campaign proved the U.S. could fight and win against a determined, disciplined enemy in the harshest conditions imaginable. Guadalcanal permanently shifted the strategic initiative. Japan would now fight defensively, stretched thin and unable to replace losses quickly. The Americans, with industrial capacity and manpower, could sustain and escalate operations. The lessons of Guadalcanal, logistics, combined arms, and preparation became templates for every subsequent Pacific campaign. It was the beginning of the end for Japanese expansion. The story of Guadalcanal is not just a tale of battles, but a story of terror, endurance, and revelation. Japanese troops were terrified not just by American soldiers, but by the systematic application of firepower, logistics, and preparation. The jungle, disease, starvation, and relentless defense exposed the limits of courage against a modern industrial enemy. Guadalcanal was where myth died and reality ruled, forever shaping the course of the Pacific War.